You wake to the weight of silence pressing against your chest like cold marble. The darkness is not empty. It breathes with you, exhales with 20 other girls whose names you whisper in dreams but dare not speak aloud. Your thin woolen blanket, damp with the morning mist that seeps through villa walls like ghostly fingers, clings to your skin with desperate familiarity. The straw beneath your sleeping mat rustles as you shift, and you freeze. Even in sleep, you have learned the language of invisibility. The sound of your own breathing mingles with theirs. Shallow, careful breaths that speak of lives lived in the spaces between notice and neglect. Your fingers trace the small, raised scar on your left wrist, the brand that marks you as property of Marcus Aurelius Corvus. 2 years, and still your flesh remembers the hiss of hot iron, the smell of burning skin that was your own. The bronze bell rings once from the master's quarters, its voice cutting through the pre-dawn stillness like a blade through silk. Your stomach clenches with familiar dread, not from hunger, though that too gnaws at you, but from the knowledge that each day begins with the same terrible arithmetic: survive until darkness falls again. You rise silently, your bare feet finding the cold marble floor with practiced precision. The villa's floors are beautiful, intricate mosaics depicting scenes of triumph and abundance. But beauty has become your enemy. Beauty draws attention, and attention brings danger. You have learned to move like shadow across these masterpieces, your presence leaving no trace, your passage noted by no one. The oil lamp flickers as you light it from the dying embers in the brazier. The flame dances, casting shadows that writhe against the frescoed walls like ghosts of your former life. For just a moment, as the light steadies, you allow yourself to remember. Your mother's face, weathered but kind, as she braided your hair on that last morning in Gaul. The way she hummed while working, her voice carrying melodies that spoke of harvests and home fires and safety you thought would last forever. The memory dissolves as you hear the first stirring of other slaves beginning their day. Claudia shifts on her mat, whimpering softly in her sleep. She is younger than you by perhaps 2 years, though slavery has a way of making children ancient before their time. Her dreams are violent things. You know because she speaks in them, calling out in her native Germanic tongue for people who will never answer. You understand, with the clarity that comes from 2 years of servitude, that survival depends on becoming nothing, not invisible. True invisibility is impossible when masters must see you to command you, but rather becoming so perfectly predictable, so flawlessly useful, that you fade into the rhythm of the household like breathing or heartbeat. Essential but unnoticed. The villa stretches before you in the lamplight, its corridors leading to rooms that hold their own particular terrors and small mercies. The kitchen, where burns are common and hunger is constant, but warmth is sometimes shared. The master's study, where silence is golden and a single misplaced scroll can mean punishment that lasts for days. The dominor's chambers, where your fate can shift with a single gesture, a whispered complaint, a moment of displeasure that colours weeks to come. You have learned to read this house like scripture, every corner and shadow holding lessons written in the language of consequence. The loose tile near the fountain that catches unwary feet. The particular creak of the dominus's sandals when his business dealings have gone poorly. The way light falls through the atrium at different hours, creating pools of illumination where work can be done and shadows where rest might be stolen. As you move through the villa's arteries, lamp held steady in hands that no longer shake, you carry with you the weight of understanding. This beautiful prison, with its painted walls and marble columns, its gardens where philosophers once walked and poets once recited, has become the entire world. Beyond its walls lies Rome, vast and unknowable, and beyond Rome lies the empire, and beyond the empire lies everything else, including, somewhere in the mists of memory and hope, the village where your mother might still wait for a daughter who will never return. But such thoughts are luxuries you cannot afford. Not when the bronze bell has rung, not when the day ahead stretches like an uncharted sea where any wave might drag you under. You blow out the lamp and set it carefully in its alcove. The darkness that returns is not the same darkness you woke to. This darkness knows you now, has measured your footsteps and counted your breaths and found you worthy of another day's survival. The villa holds its breath around you, beautiful and terrible, a monument to human ambition built on the backs of human suffering. And you, with your scarred wrist and careful movements, your buried memories and guarded hopes, are part of its very foundation. Not by choice, never by choice, but by the strange arithmetic of empire that turns free children into property, daughters into assets, names into numbers in a ledger book you will never learn to read. Dawn is still hours away, but your day has begun. The corridors of the villa unfold before you like the chambers of a heart, beautiful, intricate, and pulsing with life that is not entirely your own. As morning light begins its slow seepage through shuttered windows, the house awakens with the particular rhythm that has governed your existence for 730 days. Not that you count anymore. Counting was a luxury of the early months, when time still seemed to move towards something rather than simply through something. You navigate these halls with the fluid precision of water finding its path down a mountainside. Every step is calculated, not consciously now, but through the deep wisdom your body has acquired. The master's chambers lie to the east, where he sleeps beside his wife in a bed wider than the entire sleeping quarters you share with 20 other girls. To the north, the kitchen already breathes with the warmth of rekindled fires, and the soft sounds of the cook preparing for another day of feeding a household that devours without thinking, consumes without gratitude. The villa's architecture speaks in a language of power and submission that you have learned to read with scholarly precision. The atrium, with its impluvium catching rainwater from the heavens, reminds all who enter that even the gods contribute to the master's comfort. The peristyle garden, where morning light will soon touch carefully cultivated roses and imported fruit trees, whispers of wealth so vast it can be spent on beauty that serves no purpose beyond pleasure. But you know the other language this house speaks, the dialect of fear and calculation that lives in the servants' quarters and echoes through the corridors where free citizens never walk. It is the language of hierarchy so complex, it makes Roman politics seem simple by comparison. House slaves like yourself occupy a strange middle ground between the field slaves who never enter these marble halls, and the master's personal attendants who sleep outside his door and know his moods better than his wife does. Claudia appears at your elbow like a ghost, her blonde hair catching the early light in a way that makes you instinctively worry for her. Beauty in a slave girl is currency, but it is currency that spends itself in ways you do not wish to contemplate. She moves with the particular tension of someone who has learned that safety lies in being too valuable to discard, but not so valuable as to inspire jealousy or desire. Together, you make your way toward the kitchen, where the day's first tasks await. The cook, a freedwoman named Helena, who bears the facial scarring that marks former slaves, nods to you both with something that approaches warmth. She understands the mathematics of survival in ways that only those who have calculated their own worth in terms of usefulness can understand. The kitchen offers its own sanctuary and its own dangers. The great hearth provides warmth that seeps into bones perpetually chilled by stone floors and inadequate clothing. But the flames that warm also burn, and the knives that prepare food can slip in hands made clumsy by exhaustion or fear. You have seen girls lose fingers to inattention, watch them continue working while blood dripped into dishwater, because the alternative, stopping, drawing attention, admitting to injury carried consequences worse than pain. Helena assigns you the morning bread, a task that requires strength and rhythm, and the kind of meditative focus that can quiet a mind prone to wandering toward dangerous territories like memory or hope. The grain must be ground to perfect consistency, not too fine that it becomes powder, not too coarse that it tears the mouth of those who consume it. Your arms remember the motion, the weight of the quernstone, the particular angle that allows the most grain to be processed with the least strain on muscles that must last through a day that has barely begun. As you work, the villa continues its awakening around you. You hear the sound of shutters being opened, allowing light to flood rooms where free citizens will soon break their fast on bread. You are grinding honey you will serve, wine you will pour. The dominor's voice drifts from her chambers, sharp with the particular irritation of someone accustomed to having every minor discomfort immediately addressed. Through the kitchen's windows, you glimpse the slave quarters, where field workers are already gathering for their march to the olive groves and grain fields that provide the wealth powering this beautiful machine of daily existence. Their faces are weathered by sun and wind in ways yours will never be, but their eyes hold a simplicity you sometimes envy. Their suffering is direct, their exhaustion honest. They know exactly what is expected of them and exactly what they will receive in return. You inhabit a more complex space, where the boundaries between comfort and degradation blur like watercolors in rain. You sleep on straw, but within marble walls. You eat scraps, but from vessels of silver and clay imported from distant provinces. You serve wine from amphorae worth more than entire villages, but you will never taste the vintage you pour. The master's son appears in the kitchen doorway, his toga pristina marking him as a young citizen on the cusp of adulthood. He is perhaps 16, with the soft features of someone who has never known hunger or cold, or the weight of another person's will pressed against his own, like a stone on his chest. His eyes find you with the casual entitlement of someone who has always known that the world arranges itself for his pleasure. You become very still, your hands continuing their steady rhythm on the grain, while every other part of you calculates distance to doorways, witnesses present. The likelihood that Helena's presence offers protection or merely ensures a more public humiliation. He says nothing, but his gaze carries weight, pressing against you like a physical thing until he moves on to whatever diversions await young Romans with unlimited time and unquestioned authority. Helena catches your eye and nods almost imperceptibly. She too understands the danger that walks on two legs and wears a toga, the way power corrupts even those who have not yet fully grown into it. Her scars tell stories of masters who believed their property existed solely for their pleasure, and she has survived by learning to see threats before they fully manifest. The morning light grows stronger, painting the kitchen walls golden and warm. In a few hours, this room will be a symphony of organized chaos as the day's meals take shape under Helena's practiced command. But for now, in these stolen moments before the household fully awakens, there is something approaching peace in the rhythm of your work and the quiet companionship of others who understand the price of each new day. Your hands find their rhythm, grinding grain that will become bread that will nourish those who own you. And in that rhythm, in the meditative repetition of necessary work, you find something that approaches dignity. Not the dignity of freedom, that is a luxury you can barely remember and dare not dream of, but the dignity of competence, of work well done, of surviving another dawn in a world that measures your worth in terms of utility and obedience. The bronze bell rings again, calling the household to full wakefulness, and your day begins in earnest. The villa reveals itself in layers as morning light floods through windows designed to capture and hold the sun's warmth. You move through spaces crafted by architects who understood that beauty itself could be a form of control, that surrounding people with loveliness makes them grateful even for their chains. The corridors flow like water, each room opening onto the next with the mathematical precision that Romans bring to everything they touch, their roads, their laws, their methods of transforming free children into property. The tablinum, where the master conducts his business, stands as a testament to the empire's reach. Maps painted on the walls show provinces stretching to the edges of the known world, each territory representing lives reshaped by Roman will. You dust these maps with careful strokes, your cloth moving over representations of your own homeland with the gentle precision of someone tending a grave. Gaul appears as a neat arrangement of roads and settlements, but you remember it as forests that smelled of pine and earth, rivers that sang with their own voices rather than channeling Roman engineering. The household's hierarchy unfolds around you with the complexity of a military campaign. Above you in ways that matter stand the personal slaves, the master's body servant who knows his most intimate habits, the dominor's hairdresser whose fingers create elaborate coiffures that speak of wealth and leisure. They move with a confidence you envy, secure in skills that make them indispensable. But their security is also their prison. They can never fade into background the way you sometimes can. Below you, in the strict accounting of value, stand the field slaves, whose faces you glimpse through windows as they begin their daily march to work that will break their bodies before their spirits. They know their place with brutal clarity. There is something almost peaceful in such certainty, such clear definition of worth and expectation. You inhabit a more dangerous middle ground, where the boundaries shift like shadows and a single misstep can send you tumbling toward fates that exist at the edges of your imagination. Marcus Aurelius, Corvus, emerges from his chambers as the morning settles into its established rhythms. He is not a cruel master by the standards of his class, a distinction that would be meaningless to someone who had never lived as property, but carries weight in the careful calculations of daily survival. He does not strike servants for pleasure, does not invent punishments for entertainment, but his kindness, when it appears, feels as arbitrary as his anger, dispensed according to moods and circumstances beyond your understanding or influence. You observe him with the focused attention of a scholar studying a dangerous text. The way he walks when business has gone well loose-limbed, generous with small favors and overlooked mistakes. The particular set of his shoulders when debts are pressing or political alliances shifting, when even minor irritations can explode into consequences that echo through the household for weeks. His hands, soft from a life of ease, can gesture commands that reshape your world with casual authority. The Dominar presents different challenges, her power flowing through channels that are harder to navigate. Livia Claudia Vera carries herself with the dignity of someone born to command, but her commands often come wrapped in implications rather than direct orders. A raised eyebrow can signal displeasure that must be addressed immediately. A slight pause before acknowledging your presence can indicate that some invisible line has been crossed and must be uncrossed through extra service, additional care, the kind of vigilant attention that exhausts the soul. She appears in the atrium as you tend to the flowers arranged around the impluvium, her stola flowing around her like liquid marble. Her beauty is the cultivated perfection of a woman who has never questioned whether she deserves the labor of others to maintain her comfort. She speaks to you with the absent courtesy reserved for useful objects, asking about the condition of her jewelry, the preparation of her morning bath, the arrival of a new shipment of silk from the east. You respond with the practiced deference that has become second nature, each word carefully chosen to convey competence without overstepping the boundaries of your station. Yes, Domina. Of course, Domina. I will see to it immediately, Domina. The words taste of ash in your mouth, but they are the currency of survival in a world where your thoughts and desires matter less than your ability to anticipate and fulfill the wishes of others. The bathhouse beckons with its promise of warmth and its threat of vulnerability. You prepare the heating system with movements that have become ritual, lighting the hypercaused fires that will warm the floors, testing the temperature of water that flows through pipes designed by engineers who understood comfort as a science. The room fills with steam that carries the scent of expensive oils and imported salts, luxuries that speak of trade routes stretching across continents. But in this intimate space, where bodies are exposed and defenses lowered, danger lurks like steam in corners your eyes cannot reach. You have learned to move with eyes downcast, but awareness heightened, to anticipate needs while remaining invisible, to offer assistance while avoiding any gesture that might be misinterpreted as invitation or presumption. The Master's son appears again, his presence filling the doorway like a storm cloud on an otherwise clear day. He has reached the age where curiosity about power intersects with awakening desires, creating combinations that make your skin prickle with unease. His toga indicates his approaching manhood, but his eyes hold the casual cruelty of someone who has never faced consequences for his actions. You become stone, your movements continuing their necessary patterns, while your mind calculates escape routes and witnesses, and the complex mathematics of survival that slave girls learn before they learn to read. He watches you work, his attention carrying weight that presses against your shoulders like hands you cannot see. When he finally moves on, you release a breath you did not realize you were holding. The garden offers brief sanctuary, its carefully tended paths winding between plants that represent the empire's agricultural ambitions. Roses from Persia, fruit trees from Egypt, herbs from provinces whose names you learned by memorizing the contents of the master's spice collection. You tend these plants with something approaching affection, finding in their growth and seasonal changes a rhythm that exists outside the arbitrary patterns of human will. Here, among the rosemary and thyme, you can steal moments that approach solitude. The plants do not judge or command or measure your worth in terms of usefulness. They simply grow, following patterns older than empires, responding to sun and water and the changing seasons with the dignity of things that exist for their own sake, rather than the pleasure of others. But even these stolen moments carry their own weight of awareness. You are never truly alone, never beyond the reach of command or correction. The villa's beauty surrounds you like a gilded cage, each carefully placed stone and painted wall, a reminder that even your brief encounters with peace exist at the pleasure of those who own you. As afternoon light begins its slow journey toward evening, you return to the house proper, carrying with you the scent of herbs and the temporary peace they provided. The corridors welcome you back with their familiar dangers and small comforts, their established patterns that have become the geography of your existence. Tomorrow will bring the same rooms, the same hierarchy, the same careful navigation of beauty that conceals brutality. But today you have survived, have found your place in the complex machinery of Roman domestic life, have learned once again to be simultaneously essential and invisible, valued and expendable, human and property. The villa breathes around you, beautiful and terrible, a monument to civilization built on foundations you would rather not examine too closely. And you, with your careful movements and watchful eyes, your buried dreams and practiced deference, have become part of its very architecture. Your hands learn the weight of the grinding stone like a prayer learned in childhood. Automatic, essential, worn smooth by repetition, until the motion becomes indistinguishable from breathing. The quernstone turns with a rhythm that has governed mornings for 2 years now, each revolution producing the flour that will become bread, that will nourish those who own you. The grain dust settles in your lungs, your hair, the creases of your palms, until you taste Rome's daily sustenance in your own breath. The work shapes your body in ways that map the geography of your servitude. Your arms have grown strong from the grinding, your shoulders broad from carrying water vessels that would challenge grown men. Your hands, once soft from a childhood spent helping your mother with weaving and cooking, now bear the calluses that mark you as unmistakably as the brand on your wrist. These marks are medals of survival, proof that you have learned to transform your body into an instrument of service, efficient enough to earn another day's life. Helena moves through the kitchen like a general commanding troops, her scarred face authoritative in ways that transcend her former slave status. She has earned her freedom through excellence in work that others consider drudgery. But freedom has not erased the particular alertness that marks those who have survived at the mercy of others' whims. She teaches you without words, demonstrating through gesture and expression the intricate dance between competence and invisibility that keeps kitchen slaves alive. You discover that excellence in small tasks becomes armor against punishment and pathway to trust. The bread you bake must be perfectly consistent, each loaf the same golden brown, the same texture, the same weight. Variation suggests inattention, and inattention suggests unreliability, and unreliability opens pathways to correction that you have learned to avoid through meticulous care applied to every detail, no matter how seemingly insignificant. The loom in the small chamber adjacent to the kitchen becomes your afternoon sanctuary, a place where creation emerges from the careful interlacing of threads that mirror the complex relationships governing household life. Your fingers learn to read tension and texture, to understand which threads will bear weight and which will snap under pressure. The work teaches patience and precision, qualities that translate into survival skills more valuable than gold. Each piece you weave carries within its fibers the story of your adaptation to this life that was never meant to be yours. The wool comes from sheep that graze on land stolen from people like your parents. The dyes arrive on ships crewed by men whose brothers might have fought beside yours. But the cloth that emerges from your labor is beautiful, functional, worthy of the household's needs and standards. You learn to anticipate needs before they are spoken, developing the supernatural awareness that marks the most valuable household slaves. Water appears before thirst is acknowledged. Fresh oil fills lamps before darkness falls. Clean linens wait in chambers before baths are drawn. This prescience requires constant vigilance, attention to patterns and moods, and subtle cues that free people need never master. The master's routine becomes as familiar as your own heartbeat. He wakes at dawn, requires hot water for washing, prefers his morning bread with honey from a particular hive, drinks wine mixed with water in proportions that vary according to the season and his business concerns. His toga must be arranged with folds that speak of dignity and prosperity. His sandals must be clean enough to reflect his status, but comfortable enough for a day of walking on marble floors. You become fluent in the language of service, where every gesture carries meaning and every interaction follows protocols more complex than diplomatic negotiations. The way you hold a water pitcher, steady but not rigid, available but not presumptuous. The manner of your approach, quick enough to demonstrate eagerness, slow enough to avoid startling. The tone of your voice when responding to commands, clear enough to be understood, quiet enough to remain unobtrusive. The market trips offer glimpses of the world beyond the villa walls, brief excursions into the larger machinery of Roman life that remind you both of possibilities and limitations. You accompany Helena through streets where free citizens conduct business, where slaves from other households move with their own burdens and purposes, where the vast complexity of empire reveals itself in the goods and languages and faces that flow through Rome's arteries, like blood through a living body. But even these journeys beyond the villa serve to reinforce the boundaries of your existence. You walk through freedom without participating in it, observe choices without possessing the ability to make them. The market stalls display goods from across the known world, but your role is to select according to Helena's instructions, to carry without consuming, to witness abundance while living in carefully managed scarcity. Your body adapts to the demands placed upon it with the resilience that humans discover when alternatives to adaptation do not exist. Your balance improves from navigating stairs while carrying vessels filled to the brim. Your eyesight sharpens from working by lamplight, threading needles, and reading the subtle signs that indicate when bread has achieved perfect doneness. Your hearing becomes acute enough to distinguish between footsteps, to recognize approaches that signal routine requests versus those that carry undertones of displeasure or danger. The rhythm of your days develops its own music, the soft sound of grain falling from quernstone, the whisper of thread through loom, the gentle splash of water being poured from pitcher to basin. These sounds become the soundtrack of survival, the auditory proof that you continue to exist, to produce, to contribute to the smooth functioning of a household that operates like a small, efficient kingdom. You master the art of becoming background, present but not seen, helpful but not memorable. This invisibility requires perfect calibration. Too obvious and you risk unwanted attention. Too subtle and you risk being perceived as lazy or insubordinate. The successful slave learns to occupy the exact center of this narrow range, to be present precisely when needed, and absent when presence might cause complications. But in the quiet spaces between tasks, in the moments when your hands work automatically and your mind is free to wander, you discover that competence is not merely survival strategy, but a form of dignity that transcends the circumstances that contain it. The bread you bake feeds people, regardless of their moral relationship to your labor. The cloth you weave provides warmth and beauty, regardless of the coercion that produced it. Your work becomes a conversation with materials that respond to skill and attention, regardless of the worker's legal status. The grain recognizes quality of grinding. The wool accepts or rejects thread tension based on the weaver's expertise rather than their freedom. In these interactions with the fundamental processes of human sustenance and comfort, you find something that approaches pride. Not in your circumstances, which remain unacceptable, but in your ability to create value and beauty despite those circumstances. The day's labor becomes a dance between efficiency and endurance, each movement calculated for maximum result with minimum energy expenditure. You learn to conserve strength for tasks that require it, while finding ways to rest during activities that allow partial relaxation. Your body becomes an instrument precisely tuned to the demands of service, capable of sustained effort without the luxury of complete rest. As evening approaches and the day's primary tasks near completion, you carry with you the satisfaction of work well done, not satisfaction in your servitude, which remains a constant weight on your spirit, but satisfaction in your ability to meet impossible demands with grace and competence. This distinction matters in ways that outsiders might not understand, but that mean everything to those who must find reasons to continue existing in circumstances they did not choose. The villa's beauty takes on different qualities as shadows lengthen and the day's heat gives way to evening's cooler whispers. In this liminal time, when the household's rhythm shifts toward the more private hours, you learn to recognize the footsteps that carry different meanings. The master's measured pace as he walks to his study signals an evening of solitude with his scrolls and correspondence. The domina's quick steps toward the garden suggest she seeks the company of her female friends for conversation that slaves are expected to facilitate that never acknowledge hearing. But there are other footsteps, hesitant, searching, carrying intentions that make your skin prickle with awareness, learned through careful observation of other girls' experiences. You have seen the bruises that appear like dark flowers on arms and thighs, marks that speak stories no one dares voice aloud, but everyone understands with the fluency that survival demands. These lessons are taught through glances and silences, through the way certain girls move more carefully after visits to chambers where business other than household management is conducted. The master's son has begun to notice you with the focused attention of a young predator learning to hunt. His gaze follows your movements through corridors with an intensity that transforms routine tasks into performances of vulnerability. You feel his eyes on you when you bend to retrieve dropped items, when you reach to hang fresh linens, when you move through spaces that require you to pass close enough for him to catch your scent, or observe the way your worn tunic clings to a body that has developed curves despite the rationed food and constant labor. You learn to navigate these dangers through strategies whispered between girls in the darkness of your shared sleeping quarters. Keep your movements swift and purposeful. Never linger in isolated spaces. Travel in pairs when possible. Develop sudden, urgent tasks when cornered. Cultivate relationships with the older house slaves, whose presence might deter the worst impulses of young masters who have not yet learned to control their appetites or consider consequences. Claudia bears fresh bruises on her shoulder, marks that tell a story she refuses to acknowledge with words, but that her body proclaims with silent eloquence. She moves differently now, with the particular careful grace of someone who has learned that resistance can be more dangerous than submission, but that submission guarantees nothing except survival to face the same choice again tomorrow. The older slave women become libraries of survival wisdom, their knowledge earned through years of navigating the treacherous currents of household life, where the difference between protection and exploitation can shift as quickly as the master's mood. They teach through demonstration and subtle guidance, showing you how to recognize the signs that precede trouble, how to make yourself essential enough to be valuable but not so attractive as to inspire destructive desire. Marta, whose grey hair and stooped shoulders mark her as beyond certain kinds of danger, pulls you aside during the evening cleaning to share wisdom that might keep you whole. Watch the patterns, she whispers, while polishing silver that reflects distorted images of your faces. Learn when he drinks more than usual. Notice when business goes poorly. Understand the times when young men feel their power most strongly and need to exercise it on those who cannot refuse. Her words carry the weight of experience survived, rather than advice offered from comfort. She has outlived 3 different masters, has seen household slaves disappear and be replaced, has learned to read the signs that distinguish temporary discomfort from permanent damage. Her survival represents a form of victory so hard won that it barely resembles triumph, but it is victory nonetheless. You discover that resistance takes many forms, some visible, others hidden in the spaces between heartbeats where will and dignity make their stand against circumstances designed to crush both. The obvious resistance, direct refusal, open defiance, leads quickly to punishment that serves as education for all who witness it. But subtler forms of resistance flourish like weeds in the cracks of the system designed to contain them. Information becomes a form of resistance. Learning to read the master's correspondence while cleaning his study. Understanding enough Greek to follow conversations the master believes are private. Memorizing the names and business relationships of visitors whose presence might offer insights into the household's financial condition or future plans. Knowledge hoarded like grain against times of famine, saved for moments when information might purchase safety or small advantages. The night brings both terror and the only privacy you will ever know, hours when tears can fall unobserved and memories can be examined without risk of punishment for inattention to duty. In the darkness of the sleeping quarters, when the day's masks can finally be set aside, you allow yourself to remember your mother's voice singing lullabies in the language you must never speak aloud. Your father's hands teaching you to identify edible plants in forests that exist now only in dreams. But even these private moments carry their own weight of danger. Too much grief weakens you for the work that keeps you alive. Too much memory creates dangerous contrast with present reality. Too much hope makes endurance of hopeless circumstances more difficult rather than easier. You learn to ration even your own emotions, allowing yourself precise portions of sorrow and rage and longing, measuring them like medicine that can heal in small doses but poison in larger quantities. The whispered conversations after dark reveal networks of protection and shared strength that exist despite the system designed to isolate and control individual slaves. Girls share information about which corridors to avoid at which times, which visitors to the household bring unusual dangers, which of the free citizens can be trusted to respect boundaries, and which view slave girls as conveniences provided for their pleasure. These networks operate with the secrecy and efficiency of military intelligence operations. Information passed through coded glances and careful placement of everyday objects. A particular arrangement of cleaning rags might indicate that the master's nephew is visiting and should be avoided. A specific positioning of oil lamps could signal that the domina is entertaining friends and the kitchen will be safe from unexpected visits. You understand with growing clarity that your body is not your own, that the physical space you occupy exists at the pleasure of others who may claim it according to their desires and power rather than your consent. But your thoughts remain your secret kingdom, a realm where masters cannot venture without invitation, where your true self continues to exist despite the circumstances that constrain its expression. This internal sovereignty becomes both comfort and responsibility. You must guard it more carefully than any physical treasure, protect it through practices that might seem like surrender, but are actually strategic retreats. The blank expression you wear while receiving commands protects the rage burning beneath. The careful deference in your voice shields the contempt that would invite punishment if revealed. The villa's marble corridors echo with footsteps that carry different meanings as evening deepens toward night. Some bring routine tasks and familiar expectations. Others bring dangers that have no names but cast shadows nonetheless, reminders that beauty and brutality can coexist in the same spaces, that civilization and savagery are separated by barriers thinner than silk and more fragile than trust. As you prepare for another night's attempt at rest, you carry with you the weight of knowledge that no child should possess, wisdom earned through experiences that have aged your spirit far beyond your years. But you also carry the stubborn flame of survival, the fierce determination to remain yourself despite all efforts to reduce you to function and utility. Tomorrow will bring new challenges to navigate, new dangers to avoid, new lessons in the complex mathematics of staying alive while remaining human. But tonight, in the darkness where your thoughts belong only to you, you remember who you were before you learned to be what others demanded, and you make the daily choice to continue existing not merely as property, but as a person whose worth transcends any price that might be placed upon her body or labor. In the spaces between commands, and the moments stolen from the relentless rhythm of service, you discover that humanity persists like grass growing through marble, seemingly impossible, undeniably real. These fragments of connection and dignity emerge not despite your circumstances, but through the alchemy of human resilience that transforms even the basest metals of suffering into something that gleams with its own light. The sharing of a crust of bread with Claudia becomes a communion that requires no priest or altar. When the kitchen scraps are distributed according to the careful hierarchy that governs even hunger, you learn to break your portion with the precision of someone dividing sacraments. The bread tastes different when offered freely rather than consumed in solitude, richer somehow, infused with the grace that flows between people who choose to care for each other despite having nothing material to offer. Helena teaches you to read the language written in steam, rising from cooking pots, the subtle variations in color and density that speak of heat and timing, and the mysterious processes that transform raw materials into sustenance. Watch the water, she says, her scarred hands guiding yours toward understanding. It will tell you secrets that recipes cannot. Her teaching carries the weight of knowledge passed between women for generations, wisdom that exists independent of the circumstances that currently contain it. A letter arrives from your homeland, carried by a merchant whose route includes the villa among its many stops. Though you cannot read the marks that dance across the parchment like captured birds, holding it connects you to something larger than the marble walls that define your daily existence. The paper carries scents that speak of home wood smoke, pine resin, the particular smell of leather cured in your village's traditional manner. Claudia reads it to you in whispered fragments during the evening cleaning, her education in letters being one of the skills that made her valuable enough to be kept in the household rather than sold to field labor. The words, translated from your mother's dialect into Latin and back again into understanding, speak of harvest seasons and family gatherings, of your younger brother growing tall and your father's joints aching more with each winter. But beneath the carefully neutral news lies another language entirely, the coded expressions of love that cannot risk being too direct, lest they inspire punishment for the one who carries them. The oak tree by the well remembers you, becomes a way of saying that your place in the family remains sacred despite your absence. We speak your name when the moon is full, translates to prayers offered for your safety and eventual return, hopes that dare not be expressed too plainly lest they attract the attention of gods who might be offended by slaves who dream of freedom. You learn that laughter, when carefully timed and quietly shared, becomes an act of resistance as powerful as any sword raised in revolt. It happens in moments when the absurdity of your situation becomes so overwhelming that the choice becomes either laughter or madness. When the master's prized peacock escapes into the kitchen and creates chaos that would be tragic if it weren't so perfectly ridiculous. When the domina's elaborate hairstyle collapses during a dinner party because humidity has made her imported pins useless. When the master's son slips on wet marble while trying to impress a visitor and lands in the fountain with a splash that echoes through the atrium like divine commentary on human vanity. These moments of shared amusement create bonds that transcend the circumstances designed to isolate and control. In the brief space of suppressed giggles and exchanged glances, you remember that joy is a birthright that no master can permanently confiscate, a flame that can be banked but never fully extinguished. The master's daughter, Livia Minor, shows you unexpected kindness that complicates your understanding of the household's moral geography. She is perhaps 14, old enough to understand her privilege, but young enough to question its foundations. When she finds you crying over the letter from home, she does not offer empty comfort, but sits quietly beside you until the tears subside, her presence a gift more valuable than any material consolation she might have provided. "Do you miss them terribly?" she asks, her question carrying genuine curiosity rather than the casual cruelty you have learned to expect from the freeborn. Her education has taught her rhetoric and philosophy, but her heart is still learning the difference between knowledge and wisdom, between understanding concepts and feeling their weight in lived experience. You answer carefully, aware that even kindness from the master's daughter can become dangerous if misinterpreted or reported in ways that suggest improper intimacy between slave and citizen. I remember them with gratitude, young Domina, and try to honor their memory through faithful service. The words taste of diplomacy and careful calculation, but they protect both of you from consequences that neither understands fully enough to avoid through instinct alone. She brings you small gifts sometimes, a piece of fruit saved from her dinner, a ribbon that has become unfashionable, a small bronze mirror that reflects your face back to you with startling clarity. These offerings carry risk for both giver and receiver, but they also represent something precious, the recognition of your humanity by someone who has been taught to see you as property. You find beauty in moments that free people might consider mundane, discovering that slavery teaches appreciation for pleasures so small they become invisible to those who have never been denied them. The way morning light hits marble and transforms cold stone into something that seems to glow from within. The sound of rain on roof tiles, a percussion that speaks of water flowing according to natural laws rather than human engineering. The scent of herbs in the garden, fragrances that connect you to earth, and growing things that exist outside the artificial hierarchies that govern human relationships. The cook's cat, a battle-scarred Tom who tolerates no master and recognizes no authority beyond his own comfort, becomes an unlikely teacher in the art of maintaining dignity despite circumstances. He accepts food when offered, but demands nothing, shows affection when it pleases him, but never pleads for attention, and demonstrates daily that even in a household built on submission, it is possible to remain fundamentally unsubdued. You learn to identify the sounds that speak of safety and those that warn of danger, developing beyond the edges of immediate awareness. The particular quality of silence that indicates the master is reading rather than planning. The rhythm of footsteps that suggests routine inspection rather than purposeful search. The tone of conversations drifting from the atrium that reveals whether business discussions are proceeding smoothly or encountering obstacles that might affect the household's mood for days to come. Another slave girl, newly arrived from a raid in Germania, becomes your responsibility and your salvation. Teaching her the villa's routines and unspoken rules forces you to articulate knowledge you had absorbed through survival rather than conscious learning. In showing her how to move through the corridors without attracting attention, how to anticipate the master's needs, how to read the signs that indicate when withdrawal is wiser than service, you discover that you have become something approaching expert in the science of staying alive. Her presence also reminds you of your own arrival, the terror and confusion that marked those early days when every sound might signal punishment and every face represented potential threat. Seeing your former vulnerability reflected in her wide eyes and careful movements creates a fierce protectiveness that surprises you with its intensity. You have learned to guard your emotions carefully, But this girl's need awakens something maternal and defiant that transcends the calculations of personal survival. The festival days bring glimpses of celebration that remind you that joy still exists in the world beyond the villa's walls, that humans continue to create reasons for happiness despite the constant presence of suffering and injustice. The Saturnalia temporarily inverts the household's normal order, creating days when slaves are served by masters, and restrictions relax enough to allow expressions of personality usually kept hidden beneath layers of careful deference. But even these celebrations carry their own weight of complexity. The freedom offered is temporary and performative, designed to release pressure from the system rather than challenge its fundamental structure. The jokes shared during the festival feel different from the laughter stolen in quiet moments, less dangerous perhaps, but also less genuine, constrained by the knowledge that this reversal of fortune exists only at the pleasure of those who will resume their authority when the festival ends. You discover that preserving memories of home becomes a sacred duty to those you have lost and those who continue to hope for your return. In the quiet moments before sleep, you practice recalling your mother's face with precision, the sound of your father's voice telling stories by firelight, the particular games your brothers played in the long summer evenings when work was finished and the world seemed full of possibilities rather than limitations. These memories become treasures more valuable than the gold that decorates the master's dining room, possessions that cannot be confiscated or sold or damaged by anyone else's will. They live in a space that remains yours alone, a country of the heart where you remain free despite the circumstances that constrain your body and limit your choices. The evening light filtering through the garden creates moments of beauty so pure they transcend the context that contains them. In these instances, watching shadows move across carefully tended plants while the household settles into its nighttime routines, you understand that hope, like water, finds ways to seep through the smallest cracks in despair. You are learning, day by careful day, that surviving with your essential self intact requires constant vigilance, but offers rewards that justify the effort. Each morning that you wake still yourself, each evening that you carry forward the flame of who you were before slavery tried to define you, represents a victory so private it has no witnesses, but so significant it sustains you through the darkness of each new day. Time moves differently when measured in survival rather than achievement, marked not by birthdays or seasons, but by the accumulation of small victories and adaptations that slowly reshape both body and spirit. You realize one morning, as you light the oil lamp with movements that have become automatic as breathing, that you have stopped counting the days since your arrival. The number had been important, once evidence that your former life remained real, proof that this existence was temporary despite its overwhelming presence. Now the villa's rhythms have become the calendar by which you measure existence, the master's business cycles, the dominor's social seasons, the household's preparation for religious festivals and political events. These patterns have woven themselves into your understanding of time until they feel as natural as the phases of the moon or the turning of seasons. Your hands have become instruments of precision, capable of tasks that would have seemed impossible during those first terrifying weeks when every chore felt like a test designed to reveal your inadequacy. The bread you bake now achieves consistent perfection, each loaf golden and properly textured. The cloth you weave meets the household's exacting standards without conscious effort. Your movements through the villa's corridors flow with the grace of someone who belongs, despite the circumstances that brought you here. This competence carries its own weight of moral complexity. There is pride in work well done, satisfaction in skills mastered through necessity and refined through repetition. But this pride exists alongside the knowledge that your excellence serves to strengthen the very system that holds you captive, that your adaptation enables the continuation of circumstances you would choose to end if choice existed. You find yourself grateful for small mercies that once would have enraged you. A kind word from Helena, an afternoon when the master's mood allows for slower-paced work, a night when exhaustion brings sleep untroubled by dreams of home. This gratitude troubles you, because it seems like collaboration with your own oppression, acceptance of unacceptable circumstances. Yet without it, the weight of constant resistance would crush something essential in your spirit. The new slave girls look to you for guidance now, their terror reflecting your own first weeks in ways that feel simultaneously distant and immediate. You recognize yourself in their wide eyes and careful movements, Their desperate attempts to understand rules that shift according to moods and circumstances beyond their control. Teaching them becomes both burden and privilege. Burden, because their survival depends partly on your wisdom. Privilege, because sharing knowledge transforms experience into something approaching purpose. Watch the shadows. You tell them during stolen moments when instruction can be offered safely. Learn which doors creak and which floors echo. Understand that anger is a luxury we cannot afford, but dignity is a necessity we cannot surrender. Your words carry the authority of experience survived, rather than wisdom acquired through study, knowledge earned in ways you would not wish on anyone, but which now serves to protect others from similar suffering. You discover that you have developed two distinct selves: the obedient slave who responds to commands with perfect efficiency, and the young woman who still dreams in her native tongue and remembers her father's stories about heroes who never surrendered their essential nature, regardless of their circumstances. These selves coexist like residents of the same house who rarely meet but somehow share the same space without conflict. The public self has learned the language of submission so thoroughly that deference flows from your lips without conscious thought. Yes, master. Of course, Domina. Immediately, as you wish. The words serve their purpose of maintaining safety and avoiding punishment, but they no longer feel like betrayals of your authentic self. They have become tools, implements as practical and morally neutral as the loom or the grinding stone. Your private self remains intact in the spaces between words, in the thoughts that arise during repetitive tasks, in the moments of connection with other slaves who recognize the flame that continues to burn behind your careful expressions. This self speaks in your mother's dialect, remembers stories from your village, holds dreams that extend beyond the marble walls that currently contain your body. The master's trust in your competence opens small doors to slightly greater freedoms, errands that take you beyond the villa's immediate grounds, responsibilities that require independent judgment, moments when your value as a skilled worker outweighs the caution that typically governs slave supervision. These privileges feel precious because they are earned rather than granted, achievements that reflect your abilities rather than arbitrary kindness from your owners. But with expanded freedom comes expanded moral complexity. The merchant who sells grain to the household begins to rely on your assessment of quality, trusting your judgment because experience has proven it reliable. The relationships you develop with other household slaves in neighboring villas create networks of information and mutual support that exist despite the legal frameworks that define you as property rather than people capable of forming authentic connections. You begin to understand the villa's financial rhythms, learning to read the signs that indicate prosperity or pressure, in ways that allow you to anticipate changes in household mood and routine. When business prospers, the master becomes generous with small luxuries: better food for the slaves, permission for brief festivals, tolerance for minor mistakes that might bring punishment during leaner times. When finances tighten, the entire household feels the pressure through increased demands for efficiency and decreased tolerance for anything that might be interpreted as waste or insubordination. This knowledge becomes another form of power, information that helps you navigate the treacherous currents of household politics, while offering insights that can be shared with other slaves to improve their chances of avoiding punishment or earning small rewards. Understanding the master's business concerns allows you to anticipate his moods, to offer service at moments when he is most likely to notice and appreciate competence. The seasonal cycles of the villa's life become deeply familiar, each period carrying its own opportunities and dangers. Spring brings increased activity as the household prepares for the year's agricultural and social seasons. Summer creates opportunities for expanded responsibilities as the family entertains guests and conducts business that requires additional staff. Autumn carries the tension of harvest assessments and financial planning. Winter offers relative quiet, but also the challenges of confined spaces and reduced tolerance for friction. You learn to navigate these patterns like a sailor reading weather, adjusting your approach and expectations according to the larger forces that shape daily life, in ways no individual can control, but that careful observers can predict and accommodate. This adaptation represents survival wisdom rather than acceptance of injustice, practical knowledge that serves the goal of endurance rather than surrender of principle. The master's son has grown from the uncertain youth who once watched you with dangerous curiosity into a young man whose power has crystallized into forms more predictable and therefore more manageable. His attention has shifted toward young women of his own class, citizen girls whose fathers can offer political alliances and economic advantages that no slave can provide. This change brings relief, but also the recognition that your safety depends entirely on remaining useful without becoming threatening. You realize with something approaching wonder that you have learned to find moments of peace within circumstances that seem designed to prevent any form of happiness or contentment. The rhythm of your work creates meditative spaces where your mind can rest despite the constant demands on your body. The relationships with other slaves offer companionship that transcends the legal definition of your status. The small acts of care you provide, helping injured girls, teaching skills to newcomers, sharing resources when possible, create meaning that exists independent of the system that constrains these actions. This discovery feels like a form of victory so quiet it has no witnesses beyond your own understanding. You have learned to be simultaneously present in your circumstances and separate from them, to fulfill your duties while maintaining the inner freedom that no law can grant or revoke. The girl who was captured and branded still exists within the woman who has learned to thrive despite captivity, and that continuity represents a triumph over forces designed to destroy everything authentic about your identity. As evening settles over the villa with its familiar patterns of light and shadow, you carry with you the accumulated weight of experiences that have shaped you into someone your younger self would not recognize, but would, perhaps, learn to respect. You have become expert in the art of remaining human while appearing to be property, of serving others while never losing sight of your own worth, of enduring the unendurable, while keeping alive the flame of hope that someday, somehow, circumstances might change in ways that allow your outer life to reflect the dignity you have never surrendered in your heart. The garden holds the first light of dawn like a cupped hand holds water, precious and temporary. You stand among the herbs you have tended for 3 years now, your feet knowing the path between rows as intimately as your fingers know the threads of your weaving. The rosemary releases its fragrance as you brush against it, a scent that has become the incense of your daily prayers to gods whose names you must never speak aloud, but who listen, nonetheless, from spaces deeper than marble walls and stronger than bronze chains. Your reflection in the fountain's still water shows you a face changed by time and experience in ways that map the geography of survival. The cheekbones are more pronounced now, carved by meals that nourish adequately but never abundantly. Your eyes hold depths that did not exist when you were 15 and believed the world followed rules that made sense. When you trusted that good people were protected and evil ones punished by forces larger than human will and stronger than political power. But there is something else in that reflection, a quality of presence that speaks of someone who has learned to inhabit her own life fully, despite circumstances that were meant to hollow out everything authentic and leave only function and obedience. You have discovered the secret that many free citizens never learn, that dignity comes not from external circumstances, but from internal choices, not from what happens to you, but from how you respond to what cannot be changed. The morning light touches your face with the same gentle warmth it offers to citizens and slaves alike, to masters and servants, to the powerful and the powerless. In this moment, standing alone in the garden while the household still sleeps, you are simply human breathing, thinking, feeling, existing in the eternal present that is every person's birthright, regardless of the legal frameworks that attempt to define their worth. You think of all the girls who came before you and all who will come after, the unnamed multitudes whose stories will never be recorded in the histories that chronicle the deeds of masters and the rise and fall of empires. Their faces blend with yours in memory and imagination. The girl from Britannia who died of fever in her second winter, the woman from Egypt whose skill with medicines made her invaluable until age, made her expendable, the Germanic sisters who were separated at the slave market and who spent their remaining years listening for news of each other that never came. Each of these women carried within her the same flame that burns in you now, the irreducible core of selfhood that no force can extinguish entirely, the dignity that exists independent of recognition or reward, the love that continues to flow toward family and homeland, and the memory of freedom even when expression of such love carries deadly risks. They were not victims only, though they were certainly that. They were also repositories of courage so quiet it has no name, teachers of lessons about endurance that no philosophy school could match, poets whose verses were written in acts of daily survival rather than words on parchment. You understand now that your story is one thread in a tapestry of human experience, too vast and complex for any single mind to comprehend fully. The pattern that emerges from all these individual threads, the slaves and the free, the powerful and the powerless, the remembered and the forgotten, creates something larger than any of its components. A design that speaks of truths about human nature, that transcend the particular arrangements of any given society or era. This understanding brings not despair, but a strange form of peace. Your suffering has meaning not because it serves some higher purpose that justifies the injustice, but because it is part of the larger human story of struggle and endurance, and the refusal to surrender essential humanity even in the face of systems designed to strip it away. Every day, you have remained yourself, despite pressure to become only what others demanded, represents a victory in this larger war between forces that would reduce people to functions and the stubborn human insistence on existing as more than the sum of our usefulness to others. The villa awakens around you with its familiar symphony of sounds, shutters opening, fires being kindled, voices calling instructions and responses. Soon you will return to your duties, will spend the day in service that has become as natural as breathing, will navigate the complex relationships and requirements that structure every hour from dawn to darkness. But you will carry with you this moment of clarity, this understanding of your place in the larger story that gives meaning to individual experience. You realize that surviving with dignity intact is its own form of victory, perhaps the only victory available to those caught in circumstances beyond their power to change. The young woman who was captured 3 years ago and branded like livestock has learned to transform even that mark of ownership into something else. Evidence not of her degradation, but of her refusal to be degraded. Proof not of her reduction to property, but of her insistence on remaining human, despite legal definitions that attempted to make her otherwise. The morning light grows stronger, painting the garden walls golden and warm. Somewhere beyond these walls, beyond the city of Rome itself, beyond the reach of the empire's roads and legions, your village continues its ancient rhythms. Your mother may still watch the path that leads toward the world you disappeared into, may still speak your name in prayers offered to deities who remember when her people were free. Your father may still tell stories by the fire on winter nights, may still include among them tales of daughters who traveled farther than any road could carry them, but who remained daughters nonetheless, bound by love stronger than any chain forged by human hands. You know that somewhere, in ways you cannot see but understand, with the certainty that comes from living close to the fundamental forces of existence, your endurance matters. Not because it serves the purposes of those who benefit from your labor, but because it adds to the great sum of human courage, the accumulated weight of all those who have chosen to remain themselves, despite pressures to become something less. The household stirs to full wakefulness, and duty calls with its familiar voice. But as you turn toward another day of service, you carry within you something that no master can own, no law can regulate, no force can confiscate. You carry the knowledge that you have survived, not merely in body, but in spirit, that you have found ways to flourish even in soil that seemed designed to prevent any form of growth that did not serve others' purposes. As the day begins in earnest, you whisper a prayer that encompasses all the women who have shared your fate across all the centuries of human history, a prayer for those who did not survive, for those who lost themselves in the struggle to endure, for those who found different forms of victory than the ones you have discovered. You pray for the village that shaped you, for the family that loved you, for the girl you were before the world taught you what you were capable of becoming. And you pray for the future, for times when no child will be torn from her mother's arms to serve the pleasure and convenience of strangers, when no young woman will learn to read danger in footsteps and safety in shadows, when no human being will be reduced to property in the ledger books of those who mistake power for righteousness. But until that future arrives, you will continue the work of remaining human in circumstances designed to make such humanity impossible. You will tend the garden and bake the bread and weave the cloth, will teach the frightened girls and comfort the despairing women, and find small ways to resist the forces that would hollow you out and leave only obedience. The sun rises fully now, banishing the last shadows from corners where darkness had lingered through the night. You walk toward the villa's entrance, your footsteps joining the rhythm of another day's beginning, carrying with you all that you have learned about survival and dignity, resistance and adaptation, the weight of the past, and the possibility, however distant, of a different future. In your heart, you carry the voices of your village, the memories of your mother, the dreams that refuse to die despite years of careful burial. You carry the love that connected you to home and family, transformed now into something larger. Compassion for all who suffer without choice. Determination that your survival will honor those who did not survive. Hope that somewhere, in some way you cannot yet imagine, the flame of human dignity that burns in you will kindle larger fires that no empire can extinguish. The day stretches ahead with its familiar demands and small mercies, its dangers and brief sanctuaries, its endless opportunities to choose who you will be in the face of forces that attempt to make that choice for you. And you, walking toward whatever challenges await, carry with you the quiet certainty that you remain, despite everything, yourself. Scarred but not broken, bent but not defeated, transformed by suffering into someone stronger than the girl who was captured, but still recognizably. The daughter your mother raised to face whatever the world might demand with courage and grace. The villa receives you back into its marble embrace, beautiful and terrible as always, a monument to human achievement built on foundations of human suffering. But you enter its corridors, not as victim only, though you are certainly that, but as something larger, a witness to the persistence of dignity in impossible circumstances, a testament to the power of love to transcend the barriers that separate heart from heart, a living reminder that no force yet devised by human cruelty can permanently extinguish the light that burns at the center of every authentic human life. Your story continues, written not in words but in each choice to remain kind, when kindness serves no practical purpose. Each decision to help others when helping carries risk. Each morning when you choose to greet the day as yourself rather than only as what others demand you become. In these choices, small as they may seem against the vast machinery of empire and oppression, lies a form of victory that no conquest can match and no law can legislate away. The bronze bell rings, calling the household to another day's service, and you answer with the grace of someone who has learned to find freedom in the very heart of captivity, dignity in the depths of degradation, hope in circumstances that seem designed to kill all hope. You've become living proof that the human spirit, like water, finds a way to flow around every obstacle, to seep through every crack, to continue its essential movement toward light even in the deepest darkness. In the quiet spaces between words, in the shadows cast by marble columns, in the garden where herbs grow despite their captivity, the story continues. Not just your story, but the larger story of all who have learned to remain human when humanity itself was under assault, who found ways to love when love was forbidden, who kept alive the flame of dignity when dignity seemed impossible to maintain. You are one voice in a chorus that spans centuries, one thread in a tapestry that includes all who have chosen courage over comfort, truth over safety, love over fear. Your survival, your persistence, your refusal to be reduced to only what others would make of you. These become gifts to all who will face similar choices in times yet to come. The sun climbs higher, washing the villa in light that makes even marble seem warm. Another day unfolds with its familiar mixture of trial and grace, suffering and small victories, the weight of the past and the possibility, however distant, of redemption. And you, carrying all that you have learned and all that you refuse to surrender, step forward into whatever awaits with the quiet dignity of someone who has learned the deepest secrets of what it means to remain human, regardless of circumstances. To keep alive the flame of authentic selfhood, no matter what forces conspire to extinguish it. Your story lives on, not in histories that record the deeds of the powerful, but in the deeper annals of human courage, written in the language of endurance and love, hope and defiance, the daily choice to be more than the sum of what the world would make you. In that choice, in that persistent flame of authentic existence, lies a victory that no empire can claim and no force can permanently defeat. The morning light holds you gently, as it holds all living things, free and captive alike, and in that light you continue forward, carrying within you all the love and wisdom, pain and hope, memory and dream that makes you irreducibly, unchangeably, eternally yourself.